Okay. So let's get started. So, today is the it's the second part as part of Mental Health Week. We are discussing a special around trauma and how it kind of impacts young people after this whole COVID-19. So there's been a lot of consideration around that. So yeah, I think first and foremost, before we even get into that, the question I love asking, who are you?
Who am I? So do you want me to start from like the beginning of my professional sort of journey before we get into everything?
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I would say I've been in the health and social care field for well over 10 years now. So I started at, you know, when they used to actually have play schemes around areas before like all the fundings were cut. So about the age of 16, I used to actually work at a play centre. So in half term after school, just literally engaging with young youth, keeping them stimulated and occupied. I started there, and then when I went to uni for my first degree, I was actually doing 2 different roles. So I was working in the classroom with reception in year 1, just because I was doing psychology and I just wanted to kind of just observe them in their direct environment and see what they kind of get up to, how they behave, how they think. And whilst I was doing that, I was also working with older adults with cognitive disorders like dementia, Alzheimer's. And then I sort of started to think, you know what, I want to get into the heavy end of mental health. I've kind of dipped my foot in, but now I want to like get to that real gritty stuff. So I went into secondary services, and that's forensic mental health. So it's actually like a secure unit for individuals that have been diagnosed with a mental disorder, but they've also been criminally convicted.
Okay.
But they can't go to jail because they've been either pleaded insanity or they've been convicted or has been like assessed as having a mental illness. So that role was very much centred on risk management, because these individuals are a risk to themselves and others as well. I actually stayed in that role for 5 years. And you know what, the reason why I left was because I started to realise that, okay, although I was able to do low-level psychology interventions, like keeping them stimulated, engaged in like discussion groups, this, that, I started to realise no one's leaving, no one's improving. And I remember speaking to a doctor and he was like, most of the people here are going to be here till they pass away. They're not going to ever get back in the community. And I just thought my skills can be better used elsewhere. Like, even though I enjoyed it there, one, the risk was a lot. You know, your life's at risk every single day, and it's not through the fault of them. Some is behavioural, but a lot of it is because if they have an episode of psychosis, it can be very violent and aggressive, and it's no fault of their own, but you're at risk every single day. And then I moved into community. I did my master's degree and I moved into community. So I started off doing direct work with children with emotional and behavioural difficulties, and I do sort of direct interventions. And then once I felt like the children were getting to a stage where they were kind of stable in their emotions and behaviour, I'd then include family, because I just think it's really important to involve the people that are directly around that child in interventions as well, so that when you do step out, they can carry on. Otherwise, everything you've done will be undone, basically. So I'm a mental health practitioner, and I work with adults and young people. Also co-director of the Cultural Connection as well, which obviously people are aware of now. And how that came about, actually, the concept is connecting you to your culture. So that's those as part of our community. So it's understanding that there's so many aspects of our identity that are complex, and kind of educating people to understand those complexities and the way that it affects the way we think, feel and behave, and then educating those outside as well, to understand that, okay, you're providing interventions with these people, but do you really understand that there's a lot of factors such as their race, maybe their social positioning, that could actually affect the way they respond as well to you, the way they interpret what you're saying. So we're very much centered on that culture connection, and we're intergenerational as well. Because like I said, the holistic approach is so important. You have to involve the people that are around that person that you're supporting, because they're going to play an imperative part of the way in which that person acts and their current circumstance as well. So yeah, we specialise in mental well-being, youth violence, domestic abuse and unemployment, and just equipping people with the skills to have resilience, to actually learn skills that can be applied to their current situation, whether it's their experiencing adversity, but also to general life activities as well. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, really, and culture connection.
You know,
and today we're talking about trauma.
I'm gonna probe a little bit further. So what's the driving force that made you say, do you know what, cultural connection it is? Because what is the motivation behind that?
Because being a practitioner myself and a professional, you realise that there's so many organisations that are providing support for people, especially people with mental ill health, and they have no idea about the kind of understanding of what that person might go through. They can't relate. They have no idea. They've never actually stepped into the community. They're very much textbook based. They've not realised that lived theory is so important as well. Actually hearing people and valuing people's personal experiences as well, and take into account, like I said before, their race, their social position, all the other factors that are involved in what could be causing them to experience this mental illness, or these feelings, or this behaviour, if they're presenting with challenging behaviour. And it's so important to have people that are part of that community that are able to educate others on that and able to provide the support as well. And I remember not even long ago as well, I was in a meeting with some organisations that provide mental health support, and not one of them were Black, which is fine, but when I'm hearing them discuss Black individuals, I was shocked. I had to educate those people. I was so shocked and appalled that for years you've been providing support and you've got no clue about these people and about, or even like the terminologies they use to describe Black individuals in particular, and Asian individuals as well. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. And so I kind of use my professional side as well to influence a lot of things in terms of educating, and that's why I'm doing my PhD as well in Black Studies, because that I'm putting a lot of things in a scholarly context as well. But yeah, that's the driving force, is to the fact that there just needs to be more people like us and more people, professional practitioners that are part of our community, that can help to educate as well and support other community groups to be able to deliver the work that's required. Yes. So yeah, that's the driving force, really.
Wow. Can I get some hearts for that? Because I'm telling you, yeah, your passion, your purpose is there, and it's very good, because I think if we go back to basically in terms of what was when I first became aware of how oppressive and how unculturally incompetent the mental health system is. For me, I've said for a while, I think that a 1983 Mental Health Act, that's dead. I think it needs rewriting, right? You know what I mean? But what do I know? No,
don't even say that, because you do know you're part of this community and you're actively, like I said, don't take lived theory for granted. You've got to think as well, as a Black people especially, a lot of our history is through narrative and through shared stories from our elders and passed on through generations. So much of our history wasn't written down, so do not underestimate. Don't say what do I think, because that is what helps to educate through us talking. Exactly. That is, our history would be lost if we didn't talk and express how we feel and share how we feel. So you are absolutely right. It is outdated. These kind of inequalities in mental health have been going on for years, absolutely years. And you know, although they keep putting money into so-called culturally competent methods of treatment, how can something be culturally competent when you haven't took the time to really engage and interact with the people that are part of that community and really understand as well? Also, I hate the fact that the term African Caribbean, and a lot of, I know, like, it's not to kind of offend anyone that does identify with that, but in mental health especially, they group Black people under that term. In Africa alone, there's over, what, I don't know, hundreds of ethnicities within Africa, in the Caribbean. Different islands have different traditions and stuff. So by grouping us under that term, you failed us straight away. Yes. You failed us absolutely straight away, because you've grouped us under one term and you're going to assume that we all behave in the same way. That is where stereotypes come in. And you're not accounting for all the other aspects of that person's identity. And that is why individualized care is important, but it's just not done for Black people. So yeah, it is outdated, and it needs to change.
And you know what? Is it fair to say that when looking at African-centered therapies, right? Mm-hmm. Am I right in believing that it's pretty much frowned upon in therapeutic communities in European settings?
Do you know what? There's some kind of some individuals that are therapists that are starting to draw on aspects of African-centered therapy and ideology. But do you know what the thing is? I'm all for that, and that underpins a lot of the things we do at Culture Connection. However, I feel as though with African-centered ideology, we tend to, it doesn't really focus on the person being an expert. Does that make sense? So we're very much centered on collectivism, which is so important and mustn't be underestimated. Spirituality, being connected with one's mind, body and spirit. But it's very much seen as your elder, and those giving you support are the experts and they know it all. That's the only thing I would say. So I kind of strive for a balance between the two. Okay, so with westernized ideology, it's very much about self-determination. You are the expert. So it's about combining the two. And a lot of us are Black British as well, so we can't disregard the British aspect of our identity as well, because that is when we get to that identity crisis. So we've got to accept that, okay, yes, we might be a Caribbean or African heritage, but we're in Britain, and a lot of us are born here. So through finding a balance through both kind of thoughts and ideologies, it will help. But primarily, African-centered works for us because, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. Do you know what I mean? Like, we have a collective responsibility, but we also have to understand that people are the experts of their situation, and we can't assume that we know it all. You know, like, you're best placed to tell me about you. I'm best placed to tell you about me. So that's what I would say with, it's not frowned upon, but because they kind of don't take into account all the other elements surrounding African-centered ideology, they just focus on the fact, okay, it's collectivism, forget it. But if they actually took the time to unpick the importance of it amongst our community, they'd understand that actually there's so many benefits of using that as well. So yeah, I would say it's not necessarily frowned upon, and they are starting to be a bit more open to it. You're seeing some sort of kind of psychological practices. They are starting to draw on parts of it as well.
Good. So there is a slight shift starting to happen. A slight shift, and us as well. A lot of us community groups and organisations, we're using African-centered principles, and we're getting it out there. And you've got people like Craig as well. That's also a scholar like me, and through our writings and our publications, we'll be able to let that be known that, you know, it works. So yeah, I think we have more Black scholars as well, which is very important, shouldn't be underestimated either. It will help to push it out there as well. Good. Definitely. Good. Yeah. So yeah, today we're talking about trauma. That's what we came to do. About post-traumatic trauma. It's very real. So yeah, the title itself is the post-traumatic effects of COVID-19 on young people's mental health. Yeah. So first of all, let's define what we mean by trauma. And I know that many people probably know, to be fair, but we've got to be clear as well. I would describe it in the most simple terms as being like a distressing or disturbing experience. Kind of like, when you were a child and you were acting up in public, and your mum would just give you that. And you know that as soon as you get in the car or in the house, you're going to get it. You're going to get it. And then as a child, you kind of like, so much things that are going through your mind, like you're trying to prolong the situation, trying not to get alone with your parent, or you're worried and you're trying to be on your best behaviour. And we can laugh about it, but at that time as a child, you're going through all these things and thinking of all these different strategies of how you can avoid getting this punishment. And as a child, that's very traumatic. And I feel like that's the best
way I can kind of describe it, well, the most simplest way I can describe it is that kind of feeling. And like I said, now as I'm old, I can laugh about it. But at the time as a child, you'd be thinking, oh my gosh. And that is trauma, and that is what I mean about trauma today, is a distressing experience. And with COVID-19 in particular, it's the same sort of thing as when you're a child. It's the thing where you know this is happening, but it's kind of, what do you do to overcome it? What do you do? What do you do? So yeah. By the way, disclaimer, disclaimer, my brother's in the chat. Disclaimer, my mum never threatened us at all. I'm just giving an example. Okay, so yeah, disclaimer. So yeah. So yeah. And this situation, I would say, it's not even just young people, it's a collective trauma. We're all experiencing it. And I've said this before, it's like with trauma, when you experience a trauma, you usually have a physiological reaction. So you either fight it or you flee from it. But we're kind of stuck in it because we can't fight it, we can't flee from it. And then you've got Boris, who's supposed to be our leader, who's giving us mixed messages. And it's a research fact that when there's someone that's the leader or a kind of authoritative figure is not giving you reassurance that things are going to be better, it actually adds to your trauma. And then us as parents, caregivers, just adults in general, how are we then supposed to reassure young people when we're struggling to kind of navigate through the situation ourselves? So then our young people are kind of left even more vulnerable. And then on top of that, you've got a loss of protective factors for a lot of young people. So school, youth clubs, nurseries, social contact. And a lot of young people, you know, that they need structured, all of us, in fact, we need a structured routine. That's gone out the window. You know, school might have been the place or that you would get a meal, because if your parents are financially struggling, that would be where you get a proper meal. That's where you've got people around you that can identify as well. If there's something wrong, they can notice, but that protective factor's gone as well, because we can't see if there's anything wrong. We don't know at all. So you've got all, and then Birmingham in itself is actually got the second highest rate of child poverty. So that's in general. Now people are losing jobs. You've got all these other social aspects, and we're kind of just in, it's just a sad situation for a lot of children. And being black as well, that's already a disadvantage in itself. So you've got that on top of this. So, you know, we're literally living in an active state of trauma, and our young people are going to be affected by it. And it is a sad situation, but we are all affected, but we've got to also look out for the young people as well. We have to.
And like you says, you know, there's a whole fight and flight thing with trauma, and there's nowhere to run. I've spoken to a couple of friends, and we've been kind of supporting each other, and it's like, why? And it's relationship difficulties, because usually they can run to work, or they could go to whatever, and their so-called purpose, which is their work, has been lost temporarily, or you know, be it. But the thing that kept them going, those protective factors that kept them going, is now coming, you know, is now leading to people meeting at loggerheads. So yes, it's all of that. And
so you've got children that are also more vulnerable to abuse and neglect as well, because, you know, it's a difficult situation for most people. So you can imagine if you're already an abusive parent or carer, and you're already neglectful, this added on top of that, there's a lot of vulnerable children as well. And although, you know, services are still running, they're limited, and parents have the choice to be like, I'm not opening the door. Or do you know what I mean? So it's kind of like even hard as for social services as well to even try and safeguard children in this situation. And a lot of our work, even as practitioners, is remote. It's remote. So how can you really, really, really be certain that people are okay? Do you know what I mean? So there's a lot of work that's going to need to be done. There's so much work that needs to be done. And like I said, it's collective as well. So that means it's going to be collective healing. It's going to be collective healing that's required as well. Yeah.
Because I was reading a report by the National Youth Agency that was about the impact of trauma post COVID-19. I was like, this is what we're talking about today. And it was estimating that there is going to be about 1 million young people who are going to be presenting with trauma in about 6 to 9 months from the end of lockdown. 6 to 9 months, right? But and even that is being stated as probably an underestimate.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I can bet. Absolutely. And there's a lot of, you got to think as well, like I said, Birmingham's got the second highest rate of child poverty, and it's also a fact as well that if a child is kind of brought up in a situation where there's a lot of financial struggle or poverty, they're more susceptible to actually getting mental ill health as well. And a lot of the times in young people, for girls, it's usually internalized, and that's kind of demonstrated through them being withdrawn, anxiety, depression. But for males, it's kind of outwardly expressed usually, and that can come out in aggression, in violence, in just complete spontaneous outbursts. That, do you know what I mean? So we've also got to be aware of that as well as parents, and when they go back to school, teachers, practitioners, that not to necessarily go straight for the punitive measures, because you got to understand that this is for children. Sometimes they can't actually, even adults can't express how they're feeling. So it's going to come out in behaviour. So it's about us being aware of that as well, so that you can support your own young people. And then when we get back into our normal activities, we can support the young people we work with as well, and know that it's going to be individualised as well. Not everyone's going to exhibit the same behaviours, but we need to be aware. And that's why we're having this conversation, that people, and young people especially, are going to be affected. And it's just, we need to be aware. We need to be aware. We need to prepare for it as well. And we need to prepare.
I'm just thinking, boy, them isolation rooms are going to be full up. Our phones are going to
But that's the thing, what I'm saying about punitive measures. Punitive measures are not always the key, because, okay, for instance, isolation room, so a child's going to be acting out because they might be frustrated. You got to think as well, a lot of children have been socially isolated, so even when they go back to school, they're going to have to redefine their identity as part of a group as well, because they might not have been a part of that group. So there's going to be so much going on. Then they've got to readjust this routine. It's hard enough after 6-week holidays, let alone this. So they're going to have to readjust the routine, readjust to their group identity, all these things. And then you're going to put them in an isolation room to do what? So they can think more alone about what they're feeling. How is that even going to work? It's not effective. And I understand that schools are busy, they've got limited resources, but it's not the way forward. And I don't agree with it anyway, but especially in these circumstances, I really think that schools need to be aware that there's better ways to deal with it. But we've got to be real, there's a lack of funding. So we can talk to the blue in the face, but there's a lack of funding. Even with us out community groups and outreach workers, we can talk and say, we know what we need to do, we need to come together, we need to do this, we've got a collective responsibility, but we've got to feed our own families as well. We've got to have the resources as well to be able to keep going. So what do you do then when there's no resources? What do schools do when they've got a lack of resources for school teachers? They've got a lack of resources just in general, like for safeguarding officers or for mentors. What do? They have to put the child in a room, because you know what, that just gets rid of the problem for now, and we'll deal with it later. And that's what we're guilty of, just pushing it to the side, but deal with it later. Yeah. And then it builds up and builds up, and then it will escalate. So when they're older and they have a psychotic episode, we've got to realise that there's a lot of things that would kind of contributed to that. And as Black people, and I know I speak a lot about Black people, but we need to, because there's not many people speaking for us. We are more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia. And elements of schizophrenia, key elements are self-care, job opportunities as well, and just general lifestyle. So we're already at a disadvantage with job opportunities. So at least one thing that we can try to focus on for ourselves is self-care, and that's why I push that, because that's one thing that we can try and control. We might not be able to control the other things that contribute to us getting into a psychotic episode or crisis, but we can control how we look after ourselves as well. So yeah, a lot of the times we get to crisis point, our children do, because we're not noticing these early signs. And prevention is better than cure. Prevention is better than cure.
And it's cheaper too.
And it's cheap. This is the thing. A lot of funding bodies They want results now, today. They wait till the problem happens and then they want to fix it. But you know what? In the long term, it's actually cheaper if you invest in community groups, because at the end of the day, you need someone that's relatable. It doesn't, I don't care what anybody says. You're only going to open up to someone you feel you can relate to. And that is why community groups and outreach workers are so important, because in some way or the other, there's someone that part of those groups that can relate. And if you invest the money into that from the early intervention stage, we can build up people's resilience so that they're better equipped to navigate through society. We can equip them with skills to kind of manage crisis and also apply to just other aspects of their life. We can do all that, and we can do it in a way that's not formal and not so kind of I don't know what's the word I'm thinking of, so kind of what's the word I'm trying to think of? So scary. There was a better word thinking of, but just so intimidating as well. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Because it's intimidating. It's intimidating, and you know, there were some statistics published the other day, and they actually said that Black and Asian young people are there's only 54% that are likely to attend appointments for child mental health services. That's no 46%. Sorry, that's low enough as it is, but that's only people that are actually on the radar. That's only taking into account people that are on the radar. So if it's that low for people on the radar, imagine the people you're missing. We're not hard to reach. We just you need to adopt other strategies to reach us. That's important. But they love to label us as hard to reach. We're not hard to reach. We're here. We're here. Coming to the community. People are there. Even with us at Cultural Connection, you know, we were given funding and we had to actively go into the community and develop rapport and relationships with young people. You know, posting on social media, doing up posters, all that. It wasn't working. We had to actively go in there on foot and be like, yo, I'm here to support what you're saying, kind of thing. We had to actively do that, and that's what services are afraid of a lot of the time. So give it to us outreach workers, give it to community groups that are not afraid to go in and support, because if we support from an early stage, we can support our young people to grow into autonomous adults that are equipped, like I said, to navigate through this society that is against us anyway, and to have a stronger mindset and be secure in our identity and our sense of self, so that when we kind of are faced with injustice and oppression, that we can, you know what, we can bounce back. Do you know what? We know what it is, but anyway, we're going to succeed. And that's what we need.
I love that.
Yeah.
Wow. Do you know what? There was something I was going to ask. I've seen you this week here, because in terms of like cultural connection, what sort of interventions do you do?
Okay, so for young people, it differs. We do a lot of outreach work, so depending on the issue. So we've got a forum theatre project, which is where we kind of address situations such as toxic relationships, youth violence, mental well-being, but we do it through role play and improvisation, because when you can kind of put yourself as someone else, it helps you to better be able to come out of your shell and to address situations, because it's not so intimidating when you're acting as someone else, and it also makes it fun as well. So what we tend to do with that is that we, first of all, we'll say a few like headlines like what's peer pressures, what's a perpetrator, what's a victim. And we do that before the intervention. This is just an example of one intervention. And then we'll do the intervention. So we'll role play different things. And then the young people will be able to, we always say, that's what's called forum theatre. So wherever they feel like that they want to intervene or change the situation, they can come in. And then once we do different kind of scenarios, after we do the same exercise and ask them what's a perpetrator, what's a victim, what's this, what's that. And you will always find, guaranteed all the time, that they're able to actually come up with more kind of description and be more descriptive of what those things are and a better understanding. That's just one of the interventions that we're doing. We find that works because it's interactive and they're not even realizing that they're learning so much because they're having such a good time, but it's being absorbed.
Yes.
Yeah, so we do that. We also do just general outreach work where we will meet up with a group of individuals and we let them kind of dictate or direct the conversation. So we'll have a plan of what we're going to discuss, but then something might have happened that week. So they might have got into a fight, or they might have committed robbery, or because we're actively involved with people that are committing crime. And then we kind of talk about it amongst us, like as if we're part of the peer group. And, you know, we kind of ask people like, do you rate that? Do you, and you know, they'll say to each other now, you know, you shouldn't have done that, and just do it like that. So we're in their environment, we adapt to how they want to interact. And yeah, that's another thing that we do, so that they kind of learn as well, but through each other. It's not the right thing. It's not just us saying you shouldn't do this and that, because we always say we're never going to tell you what you're doing is wrong, but we're going to show you another way in which you could have approached that. We also do employment courses as well. So that's for young people, and we do older adults ones as well, where they haven't been in employment for years and they just need that confidence and skill building to get back into employment. And our interventions around domestic abuse are basically centered on supporting people to identify warning signs, trigger signs, what toxic relationship is. We talk a lot about consensual, because a lot of people don't realize the extent to which consent goes as well. So yeah, we do all sorts. We also do, last year when we first launched, we did a kind of intergenerational debate where we had a panel and we discussed different topics. So we'd like to be able to do that yearly as well. So yeah, we do all sorts of interventions. We just adapt to the specific group, and like I said, things have to be individualized. We'll go with an idea, but we adapt. If the individuals we're working with don't want to do that, we can adapt. We'll still stick on the kind of same narrative, but we'll adapt to make it suit you. And I think that's what a lot of practitioners need to do as well, because there's no point in not being flexible, because you're not going to achieve what you need to achieve. You're not.
They'll shut you down there and then. So yeah,
this is what I mean. And it's so hard to build a rapport, and that's what we pride ourselves on as well, building an instant rapport. Because if even us as adults, if you don't trust someone or you don't gel with someone, you're not going to be interested at all in continuing. You're not going to be interested. So it's so important to build that rapport and build that trust as well. Even though some of our projects were funded by the police, there are certain things that we don't share, because you got to have trust. And unless it's like a safeguarding issue where, you know, what they've shared is the risk of harm to themselves or others, there's no need to share it. Because once you break that trust, you've got to weigh up the kind of pros and cons of it. You break that trust, and then everything you've done is undone, and they might go on to commit a serious crime, might go on to be killed, they might go on to commit a crime. So you've got to weigh up as well. Is it worth breaking that trust, or just staying there, knowing that they're actually actively doing stuff that are not right, but knowing that you're on the path to guiding them? And that's what we have to weigh up a lot of the time. Yeah. Like, do we tell? No. But you know what? It's better to just stay close to you and know that, like, we've got you in it.
Yeah.
But, and we can also keep checking on you and guiding you and molding, because it's not, nothing happens overnight, especially those that are already. That's why I say early intervention is important, because the ones that we work with that are already involved in certain things, it's a lot harder. And you know, our work is spread over a long period of time. Whereas from an early intervention stage, it's easy to, because between the age of like 12 to 18, children are very impressionable, because that is when the key years of young people forming their identity, and that's when they're kind of deciding who they are, their sexuality, what kind of like role they might want to go into, and that's when they're easy to manipulate, especially 14, 15 as well. That is when they're so easy to be manipulated, and so it's really important to get in at that stage, because after that it's going to be very hard to go back.
Do you know,
so the key ages like 12 to 18, but 14 to 15, year 9, that is the age group that you really have to pay your attention to if you want to kind of really support.
Do you know what you've said has popped off so many questions, Scott? So for me, just thinking about some situations and some young people, from one of the observations I've made is that trauma, right, can massively impact an individual's ability to desist from certain behaviors. So some people talk about this reachable, teachable moment and stuff as being a key moment where they've experienced a trauma, and that's an opportunity for them to break free. Now, from some actually that makes it more difficult for them, what they've gone through is actually made it more difficult for them to leave that. You know what I mean? What they're up to. Is that something that you've come across?
Because of the attachment that they built to it.
Yeah. What the attachment trauma? You mean?
Yeah, like no, the attachment to this. You said it's hard to leave the situation.
Okay, so say for example they're involved in youth violence and stuff like
Yeah.
that. They're in that. I hate to call it that life and that lifestyle.
Yeah.
You know what
but
I mean?
it's call a spade a spade.
Yeah. So they're on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what I've picked up is that sometimes trauma makes it more difficult for them to leave that.
I would say I'm not sure. I feel like you build in life. We've all got like an innate need to be attached to something or someone, and especially from very young in childhood, you weren't able to develop that attachment with a primary caregiver. It doesn't even have to be your mom, your dad, just your main caregiver. Then you constantly go throughout life yearning for that attachment, and a lot of the times, especially if you've grown up in a kind of neglectful or abusive environment, your working models, so the way in which you think and behave, are based on a lot of aggression and also on having this resentment towards authoritative figures. So if you're in an environment that you kind of feel like you're being looked after, whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. It's, you know, you feel a bit more safe. You feel these people aren't those authoritative figures that are letting you down or hurting you or neglecting you, then that's what you become attached to. So then the things that happen as a result of that, you kind of don't focus on that because you're yearning to be attached, and that's the main thing. You might be attached to like the gang leader or an elder, or your friends become your family.
Yes.
So that's what you're attached to. So whether they're telling you to do good things or bad things, you feel wanted. You feel that, you know, that's an innate need that we all have in you. That's what you find that in abusive situations as well. Like sometimes people find it hard to leave because they're attached to that person and they don't want to be left yearning for an attachment by coming out of that situation. It's a very scary feeling, being lonely as well. So I feel like it's not that they're attached to the trauma or the trauma that keeps them. I think that's just doesn't feel that bad because the attachment they have to that group or whatever overrides that. That's what I think.
So I'm just thinking, is that what's described as like that trauma bonding?
Yeah, I think you know what? I think so. I would say that because you find that I did come across that term quite recently actually, because someone kept saying it not long ago. I can't remember who it was, and I thought, let me look that up because I've never referred to it as that. Yeah. But it is a real thing, especially in abusive situations, and that person's not really seen as a perpetrator, and that's why you need people around you to support you to identify that those toxic behaviors and that it's not the right thing, and that there's other options available like that can support you. But when you're in it, you're not going to see that, because at the end of the day, whether you've been abused, beaten up, kicked down or whatever, that person's claiming that they love you, and that's what you need. Yeah. And that's what you want. You got that innate need to just be attached, to be connected to something, whether that connection is good or bad. You're connected.
Yes.
And that's the problem. And I know that there's probably been loads of questions as well, but I've been missing there. But I don't know if you can pick them more.
Yeah. What?
I haven't been seeing what's the conversation that what people are saying. But yeah, trauma bonding is a real thing. Yeah. Is an absolute real thing. But yeah, I don't think that necessarily I've come across people that are attached to the violence, or I guess some people might get a thrill out of certain activities, but again, it'll be linked to, there's a root cause to everything, and that's what we've got to understand. There's a root cause to absolutely everything. There's always a reason behind why people think, feel and behave the way that they do, and that's what we've got to understand. There's always a reason behind it. So yeah, in regards to this particular trauma with COVID-19, when we come out of it, we've just got to be aware that, you know, there's a lot of young people that are going to be experiencing the trauma that they might not even be aware of or understand, and the effects might not show straight away. It might start progressively showing and then not show its head till later on in the year or even next year. But we've got to be aware that this is a huge life change. This is a huge change for a lot of people. You know, I mean, like, even being around your family all the time as well, if you're not used to that, it's a lot. It's a lot. Like, even if parents are working from home, it's hard to keep up that homeschool routine as well. So kids are literally just out of routine, out of, you know, and that affects their ability to develop as well, cognitively, mentally, when they've not got a routine. But it doesn't mean that you're a bad parent or a bad person, but how are you supposed to balance everything? You're trying to even navigate through life yourself, through the situation. You don't even know what tomorrow's going to bring. You don't even know what nonsense update Boris is going to give. So you're trying to navigate yourself. So we've got to be kind to ourselves as well and just understand, you know what? We can only do the best that we can do, you know. Some children are not going to, even though they might be experiencing trauma, they'll probably be fine afterwards. But it just depends on their home situation and how they were before. It's the children or young people that already were at a disadvantage that will be the most significantly affected, that were already at high risk, such as, like I said, children living in poverty, being abused, neglected, being black goes against just bad, on having health issues, just having sort of learning difficulties as well. Children in care. It's those groups of young people that might be more significantly affected and have the long-term effects because they're at higher risk anyway, and this has just kind of amplified that risk.
Yes. Because one of the things that I found was, you know, when there was this, you know, even the thought about going back to school with this social distancing stuff.
Yeah.
That stuff for a year one or a nursery kid sounds scary. Yeah.
It would. Yeah.
You know, so your teachers are all wrapped up in their PPE. They're telling you sit over there and all you want to do is jump over and play games. And do you know what I mean? The way you interact and learn is not the same. And everything's all distance and marked up and squared and you've got to comply, and that's traumatic, man.
This is the thing, and I'm so against going back to school whilst we're so unsure, because like I said, children are already experiencing a traumatic time, so you're going to further add to the trauma by then putting them in an environment with their peers and then telling them, well, actually, you can't go by your peers. How is a 4-year-old, 5-year-old supposed to understand that? That is adding to their trauma, because they're already confused as it is. They can't really I'm confused myself. I can't really understand the situation anyway. So imagine a 4 or 5-year-old. Then they're in a classroom with individuals, with young people that they want to play with, that they haven't seen in a long time, and they're being told stay 2 meters apart. So what happens at break time? When they go out, are they going to have teachers hovering over them and saying, "No, don't go over there"? You're going to be restricting their movement. They might as well stay at home, where they're with their loved ones that they're familiar with, where they've had to be anyway for the past how long, than be taken out of that safe space and be put into school, because then you'll find then that school will no longer be a protective factor. So that's what I spoke of earlier, where, you know, you've got youth club schools, nurseries are protective factors for a lot of young people, because it's just gives them structure. It's where they get their food. It's where, you know, you've got adults that are there to keep you safe. Then you're going to put them in an environment that they usually feel safe in. And then that's going to become a threatening environment.
Yeah.
So then how then do they navigate through that then? Because then there's going to be a lot of anxiety about the thought of going to school.
Yes.
So it's no longer going to be, I mean, not saying that all kids like school, but, you know, some kids are like going to school because they're going to learn, going to see their friends. There's no longer going to be that excitement. It's going to be a lot of anxiety and uncertainty surrounding that when you tell your child you've got to go to school. And then that's going to make it difficult for you as a carer or a parent, because then you've got to you'll start feeling guilty, or you'll start thinking, well, what can I do? You've got to go to school. So it's honestly, like, I don't know who thought of the idea of sending the kids back to school, but it's going to completely stop that from being a safe space. It's going to completely, it's just not a good idea, and it's going to add to trauma, and then it's going to be very hard to undo, because that's an environment that they have to go to every single day.
Exactly. Better,
So
better they stay at home in their pajamas, yeah? And
this is what I'm saying. Better just at home. Better the devil, it's not the easiest of things, but you're doing it anyway. So stay like this, and then when everything's back, there's a bit of certainty around it. That's when you move on.
yeah, yeah,
And let them go back to school. So yeah, I think homeschooling is the best for now if you're in a position to do it, because I do understand as well that there's a lot of pressure of people to go back to work. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's why they're trying to rush the schools to be back open. But everything needs to align. If you're telling people to go back to work, then everything just needs to say lockdown's over and just let everyone start to readjust and get back to this new normal, because it's never going to be how it was. But you're not even giving people the chance to readjust at all.
yeah.
So yeah, it's not a good idea. So yeah, just in to summarize, I think moving forward, we need to understand that we're experiencing collective trauma, and that's going to take collective healing. So we're all going to have to pull together as a community as well, and have that kind of corporate parenting where we are aware that this is a traumatic time. We're aware that there's certain groups of young people that are going to be more vulnerable and susceptible to having their mental well-being affected by the situation, and that understanding that kids are going to have to go through a lot. They're going to have to, again, readjust to their group identity. They're going to have to readjust to a routine again. They're going to have to readjust to kind of just being around people that they just haven't been around in a long time. And yeah, we just have to be aware that there's going to be a lot of work that needs to be done, but not just on our level, on a structural level as well. Do you know what I mean? So there's only so much we can do. There's only so much talking we can do, but realistically, it all lies with the government and the higher up to be able to listen to these conversations and take these things on board. Because we can only do so much, and we've got limited resources. So all we can do is start with an awareness that as parents, try not to be too punitive. If your child's presenting with challenging behaviour, don't straight away just go and want to cuss them or punish them or whatever. Try and understand why they may be feeling that way, or why they may be kind of having those outbursts, or even just be aware. If, like I said, with girls, are more likely to be withdrawn. Just start to be aware and notice different things, and reassure your child as far as you can, because we can't be certain. We're not sure of ourselves. So just do what you can do. Don't beat yourself up, but just be aware. Be aware that it's a traumatic time for children, and they're going to need your support. They're going to need your love. They're going to need your care, and love and care for yourself as well. Because if you don't look after yourself, you can't look after your children.
That's it.
You can't look after your children. So yeah, that's a summary of today's talk. Really, I don't know if there's anything else you want to ask me.
Well, I think from what you were summarising, there's a lot of good stuff. I'm gonna run through see if I can get a couple of questions up, and a couple of comments. So I
missed out all the comments, but I need to look. Hopefully, I can see it afterwards. I'll have a look.
I'm just scrolling one. So one says we are being oppressed as practitioners by whistleblowing. So that was going back to being quite mindful in terms of what we're sharing.
Oh yeah, we had this discussion the other day, didn't we? When I think that, do you know what, you're able to share things, but you just have to be mindful of the way you say it. So as long as you're not specific with regards to talking about like naming an organisation or naming a person that you're working with, as long as you're not specific, there's nothing anyone can do, because it's your experience and you're entitled to share your experience. It's your lived theory, and you're entitled to do that. So as long as there's no specifics, there's no harm done. So I would say with regards to that, yeah, just share what you want to share. It's not whistleblowing because you're not being specific.
Yeah.
And it's important to share so that we can learn as well. Do you know, how are we supposed to have informed practice if we're not sharing stories and sharing learning? This is it. Yeah.
There's another question of asking about the age range of I think your provision for young people.
Oh, I would say our youngest is senior school years, really. So it's like 11, and we go up to supporting people up to like in their 60s.
Okay.
So, but our youngest people vision is usually about 12 to 18, because it's those formative years that I was talking about when you're identities that it's kind of developing and forming, and you're most vulnerable and susceptible to things. So yeah, 12 to 18.
Okay. And there's another question that's come through. Isn't this the ideal time for schools to reevaluate how they support children's mental health?
100%. 100,000,000%. But schools are limited as well. I mean, at the moment, I'm working on a youth manifesto with the local MP in ways in which we can support youth mental health provision. And it's groups. It's only fortunate that that particular MP wants to do that, but we need more MPs doing that, so that then we can, because they're the ones who pull the strings and can kind of decide where funding is going. Because schools are limited as well. As much as we might cost schools, they are under the government, and they require funding as much as we do as organisations to be able to do things. So if they're not receiving the support from a high level, they're limited in how they can support our children.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess they can only do the best they can do. But if we kind of take mental health more serious and understand that it's a real thing, and there's millions of children affected by mental ill health, then the money will be directed in the correct places. But I think it's about building that awareness and stop letting children get to adulthood where they reach crisis point.
Yes.
Let's recognise the signs from early. Like I said before, with females, it tends to be more withdrawn behaviour, anxiety, depression, even self-harm. With young boys, it tends to be more outwardly kind of like in aggression and violence and antisocial behaviour as well. So, and that's not to say that it's applicable to everyone, but it's just research has shown that that tends to be how it goes.
Yeah. So, you know what? It kind of brings me to think about this. This is likely to cut off in a second. All right.
That's okay. We're summarising anyway.
Yeah. What is there that we can do to help our children become emotionally literate, so they can actually speak how they feel? What can
this is this is the thing. We have to support children to be aware of their emotions, and also not, I think, no one shoot me for this, but in a Black community, we're very much guilty of saying, what are you crying for? I'm going to give you something to cry for. Don't be a baby, man. Like, we are guilty of doing things like that, and straight away you're shutting down that child's emotions. So when they're older, they then start to suppress those emotions, because they're going to just remember, well, if I cry, I'm a baby, or if I show emotion, I'm going to get punished for it, I'm going to get beaten, or I'm going to get cussed, I'm going to get grounded. So I think as a people, we need to be aware of us as well, and how we make our children and young people feel when they express their emotions, and let them know that it's not to say, you need to cry for every little thing, but let them know that it's okay to be sad, but don't dwell in that sadness. So it's also building their resilience. It's okay to shout because you're angry, but watch your tone and do it in the right way. But you can do it in a different way. You can express your anger and frustration in a different way, and teach children how to communicate. So yeah, you're angry, but do you know what? Stop and say, I don't like that. That's upset me. And show that there's other ways to do things. And it's through doing that, it will just start to become natural to children if we take a conscious effort to do that. So it's about realizing that don't shut down emotions, because it's normal to experience emotions, but it's teach children how to express those emotions appropriately, and then how to overcome those emotions, so that you don't stay in that feeling for too long. Because when you stay in that feeling and dwell in that feeling, that's when it starts to lead to other things. So it's very much about letting it be okay to express your emotions, but doing it in a way that's appropriate and not too much.
And for me, I think it kind of leads on to what we were speaking about in the week on the phone, where we was talking about how if we can improve emotional literacy, this therefore can take us away from stress and trauma being our default setting. Do you know what I mean? And do you know what I mean? For some young people, that actually becomes their default. And really, through emotional literacy, this can help this. I think we've got about 20 seconds left.
That's cool. I mean, I'm good to wrap up unless you want to ask anything else. I think the key points to understand is that this is a collective trauma. We're all going through it, and just be consciously aware of how it might be impacting ourselves and our children, and just do the best that you can do, and don't be too harsh on yourself.
Literate are we as parents? How much do we know about the apps that are